Over the course of the past day, Ukraine's defense forces repelled 15 Russian assaults and struck 2 Russian ammunition storage points and 2 electronic warfare systems. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 1800 on the 2nd of June. Details: over the course of the day, Russian forces conducted 62 airstrikes and 15 missile strikes, and deployed multiple launch rocket systems in around 20 attacks on positions of Ukrainian troops and on civilian settlements. Russia continues to focus its main efforts on trying to establish full control over Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. Russian occupation forces carried out 15 assaults, all of which were repelled by the Ukrainian defense forces. On the Severshina and Slobozhanshina fronts, Russian forces are continuing to maintain their presence in areas near the Russian-Ukrainian border. They deployed aircraft, mortars and artillery to fire on civilian settlements on these fronts. On the Kupiansk front, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive operations near Novoselivsky, Luhansk Oblast, and deployed mortars and artillery to fire on 10 civilian settlements in Kharkiv Oblast, and on Novoselivsky in Luhansk Oblast. Russian forces also conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the vicinity of Makivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Spernk, Donetsk Oblast, on the Lyman front. Russian aircraft struck settlements in Donetsk Oblast. The occupiers also shelled areas in the vicinity of Nevsky and Bilohorivka, Luhansk Oblast, and Verkhnekamiansk, Torsky, Spern and Rozdalivka, Donetsk Oblast. Russian aircraft struck areas in the vicinity of Bila Hora and Chasiv Yar, Donetsk Oblast. 8 civilian settlements in Donetsk Oblast also came under Russian fire. Russian forces did not make any attempts to advance on the Avdiivka front. Over the course of the day, Russian aircraft struck areas in and around Avdiivka, Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces also shelled Avdiivka, Karlivka and Pervomaysk, Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, Russian forces made attempts to advance on the city of Marinka, but Ukraine's defense forces repelled all 8 Russian assaults. Estimated Russian losses comprise 10 personnel who were killed and 20 who were wounded. 2 Russian armored vehicles were destroyed. Russian forces also conducted an airstrike on Marinka and shelled Krasnohorivka, Georgivka, Pobeda and Novomykhailivka, Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russians shelled Vuhledar, Novokranka and Prekostivka. Russian forces are on the defensive on the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts. They conducted airstrikes on and shelled several frontline civilian settlements on these fronts. Over the course of today, Ukrainian aircraft carried out 8 airstrikes on areas where Russian military personnel and equipment were concentrated, and 2 on Russian anti-aircraft missile systems. Ukraine's defense forces downed 15 Russian cruise missiles and 17 Shahed drones. Units of Ukraine's rocket forces and artillery struck a Russian command post, 2 ammunition storage points, 2 electronic warfare systems, a radar and a multiple launch rocket system. The General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces reported on June 3 that Russia has lost 209,470 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion, with an estimated 560 casualties on June 2. Ukraine's Air Force launches 15 strikes on enemy positions. In the past 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces have launched 15 airstrikes on Russian personnel clusters and 2 more on enemy air defense missile systems. The relevant statement was made by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook, and Ukrinform correspondent reports. Russian troops have launched 67 airstrikes and 17 missile strikes over the past day, and have opened fire with multiple launch rocket systems MLRS 91 times. The threat of Russian missile and air strikes is persisting all over Ukraine. According to the General Staff, Russian invaders continue focusing efforts on attempts to fully seize the Luhansk and Donetsk region. 29 military clashes have occurred in the past 24 hours. In the Volyn and Polishcha directions, the operational situation remained rather unchanged. In the Siversky and Slobozhansky directions, Russian troops continue maintaining military presence within the areas bordering with Ukraine. The enemy launched air strikes near the Kharkiv region's Oherstiv, as well as mortar and artillery strikes on the Chernihiv region's Yenjulivka, Leonivka and Remyok, the Sumy region's Novovasilivka, Saradina Buda, Romashko, Atinsk, Bezsalivka, Bilovadi, Basivka, Unikivka, Pokrovka, Novodmitrivka and Vlika Pisarivka. The Kharkiv regions Udi, Kazaka Lopan, Veterinard, Hoptivka, Piln, Zelin, Verkhnia Pisarivka, Staricha, Ohertsev, Hatish, Platonivka, Vovchansk, Zabin, Rybakin, Budarki, Zemlyanki, Chuhunivka and Odradna. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian invaders conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near the Luhansk region's Novoselivsky. The enemy launched artillery and mortar strikes on the Kharkiv region's Topoly, Vorochansk, Kamyanka, Fyholivka, Vorokna, Kutkivka, Kyslivka, Tabevka, Kotlyarivka and Berestov, and the Luhansk region's Novoselivsky. In the Lyman direction, Russian troops conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near the Luhansk region's Makivka and the Donetsk region's Spern. The enemy launched airstrikes near the Luhansk region's Bilohorivka and Ivanivka, and the Donetsk region's Spern, as well as artillery strikes on the Luhansk region's Nevsky and Bilohorivka, and the Donetsk region's Spern, Verkhniokamyansk, Torsky, Rozdalivka. In the Bakhmut directions, Russian invaders conducted offensive actions towards Ivanovsky but had no success. The enemy launched airstrikes near the Donetsk region's Bila Hora and Chasev Yar. The enemy shelling affected the Donetsk region's Vashukivka, Orikovo-Vasilivka, Novomarkov, Chasev Yar, Predtekheim, Bila Hora and New York. In the Avdiivka direction, Russian occupiers launched airstrikes near the Donetsk region's Avdiivka, as well as artillery strikes near the Donetsk region's Avdiivka, Pervomaisk and Karlivka. In the Marinka direction, Ukraine's defense forces repelled 14 enemy attacks near the city of Marinka. The enemy suffered significant losses in terms of personnel and military equipment. Russian invaders launched airstrikes on Marinka and Katerinivka, as well as artillery strikes on the Donetsk region's Krasnohorivka, Heorhivka, Pobeda and Novomikhailivka. In the Shakhtarsk direction, the enemy launched airstrikes near Prekostivka, and shelled Vuhledar, Prekostivka and Novokranka. In the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions, Russian occupiers continue holding defense. The enemy launched airstrikes near the Zaporizhia region's Olhaivsky and Novodanilivka, as well as the Kherson region's Vesel, Kozatsky and Odrodokamyanka. Russian invaders shelled the Donetsk region's Vremivka, the Zaporizhia region's Malinivka, Huliaipol, Zaliznikny, Huliaipilsky, Bilahiria, Malotokmichka, Orakiv, Novoandriivka and Komaishuvika, the Mykolaiv region's Oshakiv, the Kherson region's Berislav and Antonivka, and the city of Kherson.